what we get in this film is great, and there's so much that's done well, but there's almost too much of it. There were points in this film that were genuinely magical. So if you don't know, this was my most anticipated film of the entire year, and I've been very excited to see it. I've been looking forward to it a lot. And when the first trailer came out, I think, like many people, I was concerned about the amount of things that were going on. This will become relevant. You know, this film is needing to introduce Superman again, a new DC universe that is starting all over again after Zack Snyder's one fell apart along with Warner Brothers leadership. And trying to do that is enough, let alone the fact that you now have an established universe of characters. You've got the Justice Gang, as they're called in this film, with Hawkgirl, Mr. Terrific, and Green Lantern, Guy Gardner. And yeah, there's a lot. But this film does succeed at many, many things. And my overall impression is that James Gunn does pull it off, but with some caveats. So let's get into that. And thanks for joining me. If you enjoy the review, please give it a like. And I'm just going to go on a bit of a ramble. So join me in my Superman rambly review. So there's a lot riding on this film. I think anyone who looks at it from the outside can understand that for Warner Brothers and for DC particularly, this needs to work. James Gunn has announced a bunch of things. He wants this to be the start of a new universe, though technically it started with Creature Commandos, but no one watched that, including myself. I didn't watch it. So this film has to work in order for everything else they've got planned going forwards to actually happen. So a lot is riding on this film. And I think you can tell watching that James Gunn is wanting to get a lot right. And maybe that's part of the problem because, you know, as I said in the intro, this film needs to establish a new universe of characters. It needs to reintroduce Superman to a new audience, or at least a new version of Superman after Henry Cavill's Man of Steel was introduced in 2013. This is the next iteration. And with Superman obviously comes Lois Lane and Lex Luthor and all of those other supporting characters from the Daily Planet, which we'll get to. And I think by trying to do so much, it's the film's greatest strength and weakness really, is that it's doing so much, and it's doing so much of it well, that you want to see more of what they're doing well, but there's so much going on that the things that are really good, like let's break this down. So first of all, David Corenswet as Superman is fantastic. He is, I mean, immediately you just buy him, you go, that's Superman. And I think that's the highest praise I can give, really. I will say, and this is more of a writing plot thing, which we'll get to. I have issues, but I would have liked to have seen more of his Clark Kent. We get basically a couple of scenes with him as Clark Kent and only one with him at the Daily Planet, which is a bit of a shame because I would have liked to have seen more of that. I would have liked to have seen more of the alter ego between Clark Kent and Superman. And as it is in this film, I think the lines are a bit more blurred as he is a Superman who is early in his career. It says at the start of the film, this is his third year. Yeah, he's great as Superman. He has this naivety, this optimism to see the best in everyone. He wants to save people, whilst other heroes have no problem killing people or giant monsters, for example, or don't mind the collateral damage as long as it saves people ultimately. And Superman comes along and is more optimistic and old school, really. And that is, as the film describes, punk rock, essentially, to be optimistic and earnest. And that really describes the tone of this film as well. It is super optimistic and it is earnest to a fault. And I think that will rub some people the wrong way, particularly people who were fans of Zack Snyder's take on Superman, who And I must say, I was a fan of Man of Steel in particular. I think as those films went along, I liked less and less what they did with Superman. But I understand there was a plan. It just didn't quite work out, unfortunately. But I think if you're a huge fan of that take of Superman, which is a more deconstructionist, grounded, more somber take, this will jar with you because Superman is much more human, which I think personally works well for this film because it gives Superman some flaws. And I don't think, aside from kryptonite, which does play into this film as well, but I think having him more human and more rough around the edges, he's not a polished Superman, particularly when it comes to expressing his motivations and his feelings. And all of that comes to a head in what for me was the best scene in the film, which is between Lois and Clark. You see it a bit in the trailers as well, where Lois does a mock interview of Clark as Superman. And we get into some moral and ethical dilemmas there about how he can't just intervene in things, even if people are dying. He can't just unilaterally retaliate or involve himself in situations and just expect there to be no consequences or further ramifications. So that all kind of kicks off. And just to come back to Lois Lane, Rachel Brosnahan. Now, I don't know if you've seen The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. And one of these days I'm going to have to review that show because it is absolutely incredible. It's by the same writers as Gilmore Girls, which my wife has introduced me to. And it's got very kind of quippy, quick dialogue that's just some of the best writing you'll hear. The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel is astounding. And Rachel Brosnahan is Mrs. Maisel. And she's an incredible actress. And as soon as she was cast as Lois Lane, I said, that is brilliant. That is inspired casting. And she is just great in this role. I think this is a tremendous role for her. She has insane chemistry with David Corenswet, which I must say, it was really nice to actually see a romance on screen. I feel like it's been such a long time outside of, the odd period drama to see a big blockbuster film like this with romance, like actual chemistry and romance and love. And it was just wonderful. And there was a really magical moment, which again is in the trailers, where they share a kiss as Superman sort of flies in the air a bit and twirls. And it was magic. It was brilliant. So big tick for me there. And I saw this film with my wife and she also thought that angle was excellent. So the other main character I wanted to talk about was Lex Luthor, Nicolas Hoult. Now, this guy's brilliant. I think he was tremendous in The Menu, and he's been excellent in so many things. He famously was almost the most recent Batman. I think he came second place to Robert Pattinson. And he also, in this case, auditioned for Clark Kent Superman. But I think one thing I will say about James Gunn is he's really good at his casting. I don't know who the casting director is, but I think they've worked together on the Guardians films and his more recent movies. And the cast in this film are excellent, from every supporting character to the main ones. And that is the case here with Nicolas Hoult as Lex Luthor. I think, again, that's inspired casting. And he is great. He is, as I said in my short review, he's petty, he's vindictive, he's just mean, evil, and smart, crucially. His plan in this film actually makes sense. His motivations make sense. He's driven by envy and ego, wanting to prove himself, wanting to be the center of conversation, not wanting this Superman alien to just take over. And, he fears what he can't control ultimately. And so his plan is to take down Superman however he can, and to get the public's backing as well as the US government's backing to take him down. So yeah, that brings us quite neatly to plot. So the plot here works, but I will say there is a lot going on. There are a lot of characters. There are a lot of things that they have to explain. I think what exasperates this is the editing and the pacing is it basically doesn't stop. There are a few respites, there are a few quiet scenes, but I think this film ultimately needed more of those, actually, to just let the film breathe a bit. Again, I saw this film with my wife, and she said she was living for those quieter moments. Some really nice scenes with Clark and his parents, and there's some other quieter moments as well, and those are all really great. But for the most part, this is like 80% action and pace and things going on and plots developing. And as I said, there is a lot going on, but I think James Gunn does a very good job of balancing things and giving each of the characters, including all of the Justice Gang, apart from maybe Hawk Girl, who unfortunately doesn't make much of an impression in this film, but Mr. Terrific has his sort of action scene moment. Guy Garner has many great little quips and lines and some action bits, and Superman has lots of great action in this, and crucially, you see lots of him saving people, which is probably the biggest criticism of mine and of many people's of the Man of Steel, that we didn't see enough of Superman saving people. Admittedly, in that case, it was his first fight and all the rest of it. There's justifications, but it was still nice to see Superman saving people and even a squirrel at one point, which, yeah, there you go. So there's a lots going on, but James Gunn does well to balance it. And like he has done with the Guardians of the Galaxy films, he gives every character a moment that's memorable and works well. But even though things are balanced well, I do have to wonder if it was wise in this first film to put so much in. It's not as bad as, say, Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, which introduced like all the Justice League, and you could tell it felt like there was studio notes sort of demanding additions that maybe weren't needed. I do think this all came from James Gunn, as he is the head of the studio as well, but I do wonder if it was wise to include as much as he did in this first film. I think I would have much preferred a simpler film that was, this is focused on Superman and he is the main character, but more focused on him, particularly his relationship with Lois Lane. That dynamic was fantastic. I wanted more of it. I wanted more back and forth with him and Lex. What we get is great. I think that's the running theme. What we get in this film is great, and there's so much that's done well, but there's almost too much of it, if that makes sense. It really is a case of too much of a good thing, or rather too much of good things, I think would be the most apt way to describe it. I did want to add, actually, as a quick aside, that the music in this film is not great. It sounds like it hasn't been recorded by an actual orchestra, which is a real shame because, at least for me, Man of Steel has an incredible soundtrack, a really memorable one with some themes that are just iconic now. Over a decade later, I still listen to it often. It's in my rotation at the gym. If I need to get some work done really quickly, I chuck on a Flight, and I love it so much. I can't anticipate that being the case here. It's a shame. I mean, I think using the iconic John Williams theme itself was a good idea, but there's not really any music that stands out here, and I think that's really unfortunate because that is something the DC films previously really knocked out the park, was the soundtrack. And I think Hans Zimmer obviously is, at least for me, one of the best working composers, movie composers of today. But that was a letdown, actually, in this film. The music wasn't better and didn't impact me in the way I would have liked. But, you know, when comparing to Man of Steel, that's going to be hard to beat. I would just like to quickly mention the CGI. Adjacent to that, the cinematographer for this film was the same as The Flash. Now, I had the unfortunate experience of watching that film in the cinema, and it's not a good looking movie. It's very flat. It doesn't have a lot of depth to the image. That is one thing you can absolutely say about the Man of Steel and Zack Snyder's films, is they have depth to their image, and their visual quality he brings to those films is something else. But this goes for something different. It is bright, it's colourful, just like the tone of this film. It's very bright and optimistic, and the visuals reflect that. And I think it works really well for this film. There are bits that remind me of The Flash. There's bits where things look a little flat, and I do wish there was, maybe a slightly more visual cinematographer behind the scenes there. But where it does work really well is with the camera work and the action scenes. There's lots of quick camera switching around that actually you can follow. It wasn't unwieldy to view, apart from maybe in the last few fights towards the end of the third act. It got a little confusing and a little jarring. But for the most part, it's very satisfying action that's well shot and you can tell what's going on, which is always nice. And briefly, CGI, for the most part, is really good. I didn't notice anything super glaringly bad, as was the case with Jurassic World Rebirth. There was like wide shots that you could tell where the end of the set was and the CGI extension backgrounds began. There wasn't anything for me, at least having just watched it literally an hour ago, that I can recall now that was really distracting or bad. You do have wide angle lenses. That does make some faces look a bit goofy, as has been much talked about in that flying scene that got released a few months ago. It didn't look bad at the cinema. I think they've corrected that or done something with it, but it's definitely a choice, and it definitely makes it distinct from other Superman iterations. So I did appreciate that. But again, your mileage will vary depending on how you like that style, but it's definitely more Guardians of the Galaxy free, with those wide angle, almost fisheye lenses in a lot of the action stuff. Oh, CGI, Krypto. Krypto looks amazing. I don't know how they did it. I had to keep reminding myself in certain scenes that he wasn't a real dog. They didn't get a real flying dog. Hats off to the team who created Krypto. Well done. As someone who's more of a cat person than a dog person, I found Krypto really likable and fun. He was used just enough. I don't think he overstayed his welcome. This isn't a Baby Yoda case. He's not annoying or taking away from the story. He really does add to it. So in summary, I'd say this is for me the Superman I was looking for. This is a Superman who is optimistic, who is earnest to a fault, and the film is as well. It's not pandering. It's not lecturing you. It's just offering you an alternative, optimistic worldview. And for Superman in a world of metahumans that have existed for 3 centuries, for him to come along and offer sort of a different way forward and an inspiration to humanity, I think that is something we could use right now. Certainly for me, I found there were points in this film that were genuinely magical, which is something I don't think I've experienced in a superhero film for like half a decade. So yeah, I really liked Superman. I think if any of what I've said sounds good, you should go watch it. You should go check it out. I think it's worth the price of admission to the cinema. Definitely. There's enough spectacle. There's enough heartfelt moments. It felt like a real throwback to just solid films that are not trying to push something on you. There's actual romance. There's actual characters that are likable and lovable, that don't apologize for being heroic. And yeah, I just had a really good time. And do let me know in the comments below if you've seen Superman. Do you agree with me? Do you think this is a good start to the DCU? I'm excited to see what's next. Did you enjoy Superman 2025, or James Gunn's Superman, or Superman's James Gunn? He's been in marketing quite a bit, hasn't he? Let me know what you think below, and I would love to discuss with you in the comments your thoughts and feelings. Are you excited for what's next? Or do you disagree with me entirely and you think this is an abomination and should never have been made, and Henry Cavill should have stayed as Superman? I mean, I really would have loved that, to be fair. It's a real shame Henry Cavill didn't get to play an optimistic Superman like this. Love you, Henry. Okay, that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed my ramble. You can tell this has not really been edited and is totally off the top of my head. So yeah. Bye.